Hey, welcome, and thanks to Sula, Avery, and Valen for joining me today here at the state capitol. And thanks for all of you for joining us today, tuning in from across the state. Today I'm going to be signing an executive order, and what that'll do is it's going to convene a diverse group of Montanans to develop a plan, and then we confront those challenges before us. I don't know, are you losing it there? Or are you okay still on this side? Our internet is. Are you getting Kia?
Yep.
Even if it shows some strange things over here? I won't worry about it. As long as you can see it, our screen's not quite showing quite like yours. But look, Montana, we're outdoors folks. And we know also that climate change is already impacting our way of life and our economy. We've experienced persistent droughts, record wildfire season, with double the amount of respiratory-related emergency room visits and periodic waves of evacuations. Peak season closure of our rivers and streams to fishing due to high temperatures. And the realization that, like Glacier National Park, those glaciers are literally vanishing before our eyes. Our impacts are among the most pronounced in the entire country. Already temperatures have risen by about 3 degrees in Montana since 1950 on average, increased about twice the amount of the nation as a whole. We've also been experiencing transitions in our economy and our energy sector that are happening within our state's borders, around the nation, and indeed around the world. Our state's engagement to craft what are really homegrown solutions to prepare for climate impacts, respond to those shifting demands and needs of the global economy. It's going to be necessary to continue our sustained economic growth and position us to continue to provide food, energy, products, technology, and one-of-a-kind experiences to the entire nation and the world. How we choose to respond to these changes and challenges offers a real pivotal opportunity to both safeguard our traditional strengths and diversify and grow new opportunities for our future. Thrilled to be joined in the room today and online in partnership with that Forward Montana Foundation. I know all of you appreciate the urgency of tackling this problem and changing our current trajectory. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and answer your questions on how we can move forward together to craft solutions for Montana. So the executive order that we're signing today creates a council that's charged with developing recommendations to achieve 4 specific objectives. First, it charges the council with taking a hard look at both the challenges and the opportunities of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions, including an interim goal for hitting carbon neutrality for our electrical sector by no later than 2035, and then have the council really dig into where we can be as a state, how long it'll take to set a date for net zero emissions for our state as a whole. This work will help all of us in our state better understand the possible changes we need to make to prepare for the future, and help us also understand how we can continue to contribute to regional market opportunities. Second, it's going to task the council with working across my cabinet and state agencies to integrate climate change information and projections into our planning and into our support for local and tribal governments as they undertake measures to prepare for impacts. Third, the council's tasked with ensuring that we provide locally relevant climate information and decision support, providing timely science projections, assessments, and tools to help businesses, farmers, ranchers, forest landowners, and communities to both inform their management and develop strategies to build resilience for their operations. Finally, the council is going to coordinate with the university system to explore new technologies that can foster climate solutions. We'll work to build a portfolio of activities to support research, development, commercialization, and workforce needs to ensure we continue to generate quality jobs and competitive advantage through our response. We'll work on being a leader on innovative energy solutions, such as battery storage and renewable technology. We'll also look at other sectors, such as the adoption of technology in agriculture that can boost efficiencies and lower greenhouse gas impacts, helping our farmers to continue to feed the world. It's an ambitious and it's a comprehensive agenda, but I have great confidence that we can build those durable results. We're not starting from scratch, and we have great progress to build from. During even my 6-year tenure, we've doubled our wind capacity, sending Montana wind to West Coast markets. We've quadrupled solar capacity at utility scales and in homes and businesses and with rural cooperatives. We pioneered place-based solutions to drought resilience and wildfire adapted communities that are models across the nation. Our university system, it's authored an initial Montana climate assessment that offers a stakeholder-driven and science-informed perspectives on the coming changes and how we need to respond. And cities, towns, and tribal nations have already been taking steps to advance climate action plans unique to their needs. Today, I'm also committing to join the U.S. Climate Alliance, making Montana the 25th state to do so, and offering us an opportunity to learn from others as they craft their own policy efforts. Now, I'm not so naive to think that the challenges we'll face, but like all difficult issues that we tackle here in Montana, I know that when we come together as Montanans, forward to certainly by getting together, rolling up our sleeves, focusing on the values that we share in common. That's our state needs, and indeed our entire nation needs Montana-focused solutions now more than the executive order now, and then we'll open it up to my colleagues here to introduce themselves to start that conversation. For those following online, please submit your comments and questions. We'll run through those here and use them to help guide our conversation as well. Great. Turn it over to you three.
So my name is Valen. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns, and I am an activist from Missoula, Montana.
Squest Pesia, Tishalk est Louis Quest. Dishora, Balaja, Ipchibachba. Hello, my name is Avery Okayo. I'm from St. Ignatius, Montana. I introduced myself in my heritage languages. First in Salish, I said, good morning, everyone. My name is Coldwater. And then in the Crow language, and I said, how are you? My name is Medicine Pipe. And yeah, I'm from St. Ignatius, Montana, and I'm enrolled Crow, but I'm also Salish.
Hi, I'm Sula Duncan, and I'm a junior at Park High, and I'm just excited to be here because I'm passionate about climate change.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to have you here. Hopefully I'll ask you all some questions along the way as well, the questions that you might have.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I was going to start off with a question for you, Senator Bullock. Thank you again.
Governor, thanks.
Governor, sorry. But yes, so Montana is actually number 5th in the nation in terms of wind capacity for wind generation. Iowa is about number 10th in the nation. Iowa is already at almost nearly 40% wind energy in terms of their state profile. we've made some amazing progress, but still wind energy is a relatively small share of our electricity generation when it could be, up to 40 or 50% of it. I was wondering what your thoughts were on increasing that wind capacity even more, and what the barriers are to doing that.
Yeah, and one of the challenges has been, look, we've always been a net exporter of energy, right? We're producing more than we actually create. And we also have what some other states don't have is all the hydro opportunities. But you look at it, and one of the most antiquated pieces of machinery that we've ever had, it's called the electrical grid, right? We've never really invested in it in the ways that we really should be. I think, though, that there are some real possibilities. One thing that, and this was about a year ago, that we convened and put a renewable development action plan with the Bonneville Power to the west to really look at what are the opportunities to grow wind capacity, not just in our state, but throughout the western region. And really took some firm steps around that table. It was everybody from conservationists to utilities to the scientists to say, how do you get there? And we also have some great opportunities with wind because it blows countervailing to what happens like in Oregon through the Columbia Gorge. We're already seeing more interest than what we've had. Puget Energy, as an example, is actually looking at opportunities that we have here. So I think that we've got great wind. We have great potential. We have to find markets for the wind, both in Montana and beyond our state's borders. By working with regional partners, we're seeing some real interest and greater opportunity. But we also have to turn around and say, it is amazing because the grid's something that we've just kind of cobbled together over time. And it doesn't make sense in that respect. Investments there, but then also exploring the greater opportunities. And folks are finally starting to pay attention to what those are in Montana. Thanks.
So I have a couple questions as well. A couple years ago, we had a huge event over in North Dakota. And so I wasn't able to attend the Standing Rock protests, but physically, but I was supportive of it, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And so, even now, I'm a water protector. I work, on the Flathead Reservation as a river guide, fishing, kayaking, rafting, anything on the river. And so we try every day to gain more support and more water protection, right? But even today, so I carry on that legacy of Standing Rock, but even today, that legacy is challenged in Montana with the Keystone XL pipeline. And so we know that, man camps are a detriment to, indigenous women, as well as the millions of carbon, millions of tons of metric carbon of CO2 that are transported through the pipelines. And so my question is just a simple one. Do you support the Keystone XL pipeline?
We've actually been working with Fort Peck and others to make sure that the consultation is direct, because look, if we lose these water, as one example, it's very, very concerning. But I think we also have to look at that oil right now is also being hauled by train on a regular basis. So the way to both protect our natural resources here and have asked even more recently direct consultation, they need to have it with the tribe and those opportunities.
So no?
I said from the beginning that, look, if it's done right, we can't take it off the table. I'm still there as well. But I think that what's happened along the way too is that this administration basically took a presidential permit through and just said, forget even the consultation that was necessary. So I think that we're still ways away from doing that.
I suspect that you are supportive of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women initiatives in Montana, but how do you reconcile the sort of quasi support with pipelines with the direct attack on Indigenous communities in Montana that the Keystone XL pipeline would present?
Well, I think that's why we've been working with Fort Peck to try to make sure And as a water protector, look, I've, in my time in both Attorney General and as governor, I've dealt with 2 oil spills in the longest free-flowing river in the country, the Yellowstone.
Right.
And we can never have that occur. But that's why we've been working directly with Fort Peck Nation, saying, let's look at the challenges, what this could do to water supplies.
Thank you.
All right, so my question deals with how we account for rising temperatures that affect the animals in our ecosystem that draw in tourists. And I guess not just are changing, so like with the parasite that arose in the Yellowstone River a couple years ago that was induced by. So I guess how do you try to keep the
and that's another thing that you have to be thinking about along the way, because we are just in the outdoor economy alone, 65,000 jobs, $6 billion spending. You in your community, I'll never forget when we actually had to close down the Yellowstone River at the height of the tourism season.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of a parasite, and because it's also induced by changing water temperatures along the way. And that's one where it was an amazing time, in as much as even when folks' livelihoods were going to be substantially impacted, that everybody came together and said, we have to do this. But it's an important point to bring up, because it's not just, what it's doing to migration patterns around Yellowstone of animals is very, very significant as well. Part of it is the resiliency that we build in, but part of it then is also, and that's why we're included in this executive order, things like the overall Fish, Wildlife, and Parks needs to be engaged as we're looking at the science that not only is impacting us, but impacting the animals as well.
Thank you.
So my second question kind of revolves around, so you were talking about how companies in Oregon and Washington are more interested, say, in renewables and us exporting renewables rather than coal. Here in Montana, a lot of our utilities is provided by Northwestern Energy, so we kind of have one big energy company that is deciding a lot of our future, and at this moment they're deciding what to do with coal strip and how to provide more electricity in the future. And some environmental activists are trying to press them a lot on including more renewables in their future plan, which there is not a great ramping up of renewables, certainly not in comparison to going carbon neutral by 2035. And we've also struggled with the Public Service Commission not really accounting for those externalities. They haven't really accounted for climate change. They're really just looking at the bottom line year to year and not accounting for how things are going to change so drastically. So I wanted to ask you how we can put pressure on, say, those kind of private businesses and also the Public Service Commission to regulate them in order to account more for climate change and what the changes we're going to see in economics of coal and renewables in the future.
No, and I think part of it is exactly what you're doing, right? Showing up, continuing to make certain that this isn't something that's abstract anymore. We have to address it. But there are also then more and more, as you can look at the possibilities going forward, of distributive energy, of keeping more energy locally. You've had co-op after co-op, as an example, that have been putting up solar panels just to take care of their customers. And there's incredible customer demand there as well. And I think that all of your voices are part of what brings this discussion forward for everyone, for sure.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned before, I'm half Crow and I'm half Salish, and as a Crow tribal member, we're deeply invested in coal. We're one of 3 nations in the United States that are actively developing our coal reserves. Of course, here in Montana, the Crow. Back home in Flathead, we're also and first to own our own hydroelectric facility. And so we're talking about basically a green revolution. You have to change socially, politically, economically in order to meet this climate crisis. And so part of what the conversation is, how are we going to transition from a fossil fuel economy to a green by I would love to ask, do you agree that we need a just transition? And with that, with specific to Montana, how would we justly transition, keeping in mind, Colstrip, keeping in mind the Crow tribe, and then all of the 13 nations within Montana? Because for so long we've been put to the back burner, right? I mean, we talk about the urgency of climate change, yet for hundreds of years, urgency has been the justification for lots of displacement and active colonization. For example, the midnight forests, it was urgent to conserve these forests, the national forests, yet overnight, 93 million acres was transferred from tribal control to federal control without consultation. So in that same vein, how do you ensure that, we have a just transition while also keeping in mind that this is an urgent crisis?
Well, and I think that's more than fair that we have to recognize that both are occurring, right? And even so, if we take it beyond Montana, IPCC says we have to be carbon neutral, net zero emissions as a world by 2050. I think that we can do it before that. And we've got to recognize, and like we've seen it in Montana, that even the overall market has made part of our generation by coal-fired power unprofitable. We're seeing plants close, but the scientists also say that this isn't going to necessarily, you can't just flip a switch tomorrow, right? And I think that from my perspective, it's an important reminder that as we go through this transition, we can't leave communities or nations behind. You have folks that have powered this nation for their whole lifetime. And then all of a sudden, it's like, no, there's something wrong with them, as opposed to saying, so we need to be investing in opportunity. We need to be investing in saying, we can't leave a tribal nation or a community behind. It was great when Senator Jason Small, he's Northern Cheyenne, and he's a boiler operator, right? One of the bills that he actually got to my desk this time was saying, as we look at the cleanup of Colstrip, when 1 and 2 shut down, let's actually pay prevailing wage. Let's have skilled workers. And I think that we need to look at this. There is an urgency to address climate change, and we need to be doing it. But while we do that, we also can't be leaving folks behind.
Thank you.
So America as a whole struggles with discussing climate change effectively in a meaningful way where everyone knows what's going on, because even for me today, there's been things that have come up where I was kind of questioning what was being discussed. So I guess how do you create an atmosphere where everyone can be included of all different...
Yeah, it taps onto this question as well, because I had just a couple of weeks ago in here our fire briefing, and the recognition that in Montana, if we look at, we had our worst fire season, it wasn't localized, even 1.3 million acres burned. We know the temperatures are much higher. We know things. And folks, at times, though, it seems too abstract. Now, yet President George H.W. Bush 30 years ago said, oh, we got to address this. We can't wait another 30 years. But I think what we need to do along the way, too, is I think a lot of the resistance comes from the potential changes and folks not being able to view this as an opportunity. I mean, ranchers turn around and say, well, what could happen to my way of life, both from a warming climate? But there are sometimes when we talk about how we have to address climate change, like I literally had a rancher say, oh, you're going to make me get rid of all cows. No, but we can actually be investing in technology to make it less, and the federal government has a role to play in this, to be less intensive along the way, or folks worrying about, well, as we address climate change, an elderly couple, does that mean that that much more for me, and on a fixed income, I can't necessarily face that. So part of it has to be And that's the idea of this council is let's look at it as an opportunity both to employ people sometimes in different ways and areas, to invest in technology. And that's from everything from agriculture to battery storage to the potentials for carbon capture. We had put out in 2015 an energy blueprint for the state. And got diverse input everywhere from Missoula to Colstrip as we put that together. Once you start framing it as what opportunities can be, not as just here's what's going to happen, it's just going to be regulatory efforts. I think that folks can start to see it. But I think they also now see much more than I was a kid growing up here. Like, this isn't something that we can just kick down the can or kick down the road 3 more decades by any means.
I guess a follow-up question would be, does the council intend to help educate the public on what climate change means?
Well, and I think that's the idea of bringing together, like, look, right now we already have like baseline sort of polling or public survey in Montana. 2/3 of Montanans say climate change is real and we got to do something about it, right? It's human caused. But that's the idea of bringing together, how I think we work best in Montana. And I've seen this in so many different areas, from how we dealt with sagebrush to how so many different, like, we bring the stakeholders around the table, diverse groups. Mm-hmm. And when you have everybody from the university system to organized labor, to the utilities, to conservationists saying, let's actually look at the science, look at the challenges, but craft it as an opportunity. Part of the council's objective is really to do that education function, as well as setting actual tangible benchmarks so we can get there along the way.
Okay, thank you.
What do you all think government should be doing and doing better? And is it just on government?
I don't think it's entirely on government, but I think government has a really large role to play, because government, right, is when we all come together and elect officials who represent our best interests to decide as a public. And climate change especially presents such a problem of a global, national, big issue where we need a lot of coordination. It's not in everyone's best interest individually to maybe do the right thing, but it's in all of our best interest to do it. So we need that kind of basic framework to operate in. But I'd just like to see government facilitating, and maybe not top-down regulation like you're saying. That can be kind of oppressive, kind of people are resistant to it. But I'd love to see just like really supporting local community-led efforts and creating those opportunities and removing any barriers there are for people to put up solar, to start a community solar project, to get involved. People are hungry to do this, but we need the tools, the funding, the research to back it up.
Well, I think government should be holding those accountable, those who are responsible accountable. I think the greatest illusion that the American millions and billions of metric tons of CO2, which is what we need to be doing. And so I think the United States government has been subsidizing and artificially propping up fossil fuel industries. We need to stop now. I think it's incumbent upon the leaders of the nation to lead and big.
Kind of bouncing off what you said, I actually think that it's important what the individual person does.
I will be studying with Dr. Robin Kimmerer on traditional knowledge systems. And so you mentioned that the council that you're appointing will be using university standards, scientific standards. We know that Western science is just one way of knowing. How are we going to privilege and acknowledge and include other ways of knowing, like traditional ecological knowledge?
Well, it's a good question, and the council is intended to be very representative, so we'll have a representative from the tribes on that. There'll be opportunity there. It's also going to be something that's open to the public. As the council is doing its work, we will have the opportunity to hear from you, from others that around the state. And we hope we get that input.
Okay.
And certainly science is a key foundation of what is going to be informing the work that the council does.
Awesome, thank you. So I have a question from Eddie in Billings. He says, are you going to urge our senators and representatives to support the Green New Deal? And do you support it?
Well, I support the idea of taking immediate and durable action. And I think that's what this is for when you come directly to, here's what Montana could do. And I'm excited to see that. And I think that there are steps that you could immediately take. As far as the specific document, the 4-page document, I think it's aspirational. But I think that there are concrete things that we can take directly, as opposed to the specific Green New Deal as proposed.
Sure. Thanks. So I have another question. Sure. I just want to thank you very deeply and personally for the vetoes for the anti-bison bills. I recently completed a master's at Montana State, and I was studying bison repatriation to tribes as well as restoration to Montana, and so I think those bills were very damaging in terms of getting those two things done. With respect to this conversation with climate change, and this may be very controversial, but agriculture is one of Montana's largest industries. And with that, of course, the beef lobby has just as much influence, right? How does the bison and buffalo conversation play into addressing climate change, as well as sort of trying to balance out our imbalance in terms of how much emissions are contributed through beef production?
So I think that that's one of the areas where, I wouldn't put it bison against cattle. UC Davis has done some studies that even if you put seaweed into the feed for cattle, that I think that you could drop emissions. I think like their initial was like 80%. So that's where, where I turn around and say that we need to look at this as an opportunity. Is it any other time? There's been more technological change in that phone in front of me in the last 5 years. And in so many ways, we've dealt with energy production. And I think that that's where, at the federal level too, we have the obligation to be investing in these areas of research to see what things will look like differently.
Sure, thank you.
We have a question from Sam from Great Falls. What actions can be taken quickly to start addressing the climate crisis and avert the worst impacts? And what can be done to help farmers and ranchers deal with climate impacts and strengthen those rural communities?
Well, I think that in part, for Montana's piece, that's exactly what we're doing with this climate council. At a greater level, it's amazing how you can turn around and say, well, we can't do this alone. But to remove ourselves from global leadership, stepping out of the Paris Accords was challenging because the U.S. can't do it alone. That's why local governments and states have been stepping back. Not even the auto industry was asking for the removal of the fuel efficiency standards, and ought to be reinstated right away. And then taking both the short-term and the long-term goal. We know that globally we got to take about 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas out each and every year if we're actually going to meet what's necessary. And looking at directly from your question on the farmers and ranchers, of the ability to turn around and say, how can we incentivize good conservation practices for the individual rancher or farmer? Because they are the best conservationists in many respects that we will ever have. And looking at those paths along the way, and I think that we can do more for sure.
So actually have a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So Montana is one of the leaders actually in growing hemp, which is a really recent industry with the 2018 Farm Bill allowing it to be grown in all 50 states. And hemp has a really amazing potential to both sequester carbon and be used as a biofuel, be used for all kinds of materials that are biodegradable, very largely friendly. Do you see that as a major part that Montana could be in, jumping on the hemp industry?
Well, I think it's interesting because we're actually growing more hemp now than any state in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at it even with, you talk about consumer use. I mean, there are ways to look at hemp for so many different products and as a net capture of, because we can't just do this. Actually, we have to capture some of the carbon. So I think that it really is providing an exciting time, and our producers all across the state are seeing what the possibility could well be.
Awesome.
Time for one more.
All right, I've got a question for Brett in Livingston. How can we ensure that Montana's low-income communities can access renewable energy?
Well, I think, Brett, that's one of the things that we've got to figure out both across the state, and one of the ideas of the council. I mean, what we've even seen over just the last, even since the time I've been in office. I mean, technology has driven part of this, so it's not necessarily it costs more to have renewable energy than it would carbon-based energy. But I think that as the council comes together, we have to look at both areas large and small. We can't leave communities behind for certain. And we've got to look at overall the way to bring the prices down. And I think it is possible. And that's one of the things why, you know, and I get the desire to, all right, this has to be done. And it does have to be done. But that's the idea of bringing together all these folks and saying, let's actually put together this blueprint, this way that we know that we can attain it. And we're certainly doing our part. Well, I appreciate you all joining. I also encourage you to keep a close eye on what the council's doing every step of the way. That by the signing of this executive order, there's going to be many, many more steps going forward. And appreciate the good work that Forward Montana has been doing in bringing this conversation, not just to the State House, but to every corner of our state.